Are all plants actually worth growing in the garden? This is a question that I've often had, and it's actually come to my mind a lot with things like root crops, such as potatoes, which I'm now fully on board, are 100% worth it. But one that I've never actually thought was worth it, and I just didn't think I could be convinced, is the humble onion. And that's because you could go to the store, you could buy these for so cheap, and really I just thought, what's the point? How good could a homegrown onion actually taste for it to be worth it over just going to the store and buying a bag? Well, this last year I grew a decent amount, and I was so blown away by, first of all, how little space they take, how easy they were, how delicious they were, and how long they lasted. So I've really stepped up the production here. Don't worry, we're not planting all of those. Some of those are going to be for Kevin and maybe someone else, but we are going to go over how to plant onions and why these onions look like this, because this might not be the traditional way that you see onions when you're growing them. So let's talk about what this is and how to actually grow onions. Before we get started, let's talk about what onions I actually have to grow here. So the first one up is Texas Legend. This is one that I remember gets like 6 inches across. I'm not gonna get too specific here because all this information and more is on their website. Next is Texas Super Sweet. Should be a classic, super sweet sort of yellow onion. Great for caramelizing. Then we have Red Creole and Southern Belle Red. So these are the two red onions that I'm growing this year. Last year I grew Red Rock, and that was actually quite delicious. We love using red onions on salads and just as sort of a garnish and for pickles. It's quite delicious. Yellow Granix, this is the only one in here that I've actually grown before. This did really quite well for me last year, so I figured I'd grow it again, but everything else is entirely new. Let's see, we got two more in here. This is White Bermuda. Love white onions. They're so good raw. Cut them up really finely, sprinkle them on tacos, make salsa. Very versatile and useful to add a little pop of texture and flavor to your last finishing touches on a meal. And this is the specialty sort of onion. So this is Red Torpedo Tropea. And rather than globing up like a standard onion, it sort of forms a more elongate onion that's maybe about this thick across, like maybe as thick as a banana. So they look more like a shallot, but they're actually an onion and they're apparently quite delicious. So I'm really excited to see what these guys are like. If I recall, these ones might be a intermediate day. So I'll have to double check on that, but I'll probably plant it anyway because I don't really have a choice. I already have it. So when it comes to actually growing onions, there are basically 3 different methods. You could start from seed and get seedlings, which is basically what these are. These are essentially seedling transplants. And then the last option, I'm going to count that as number 2, is starting from sets. And sets are basically like little tiny pearl onions. And the thing with sets is that they seem really convenient, but they have a really poor success rate in terms of forming nice bulbs. Everyone I've talked to and everyone who I've known who have tried growing from sets, including myself, found that they just kind of underperform. So while they seem really convenient, if you had to choose just one way to grow onions, this is definitely it, because all of these are totally ready to go. I mean, look how big this one is here. If I tried to grow this at home, this would have taken me, at least 2 months to get to that size, probably more, and I would have had to fertilize it for it to thicken up quite like this. So this is giving me a huge head start, and these will be very successful at forming nice, delicious, big bulbs, and they're also quite easy to plant. Before we actually move over, let's take a look at these tops here. You can see they've all been sort of trimmed off at the top. Most likely this is due to shipping, so it's easier, but if you are growing your own onion starts, you can actually trim them periodically, and this will encourage more root growth. So that might be a doubled up strategy where they were trimming them consistently to get that root growth, and also they trimmed them at the end to make it easier to ship. Let's go over to that back garden there and plant a couple rows of onions. I'm gonna start by just sprinkling some compost in the new growing area. This will help break up the soil at the surface, make it easy to plant. To solve the irrigation for these onions, I'm going to be using 6-inch emitter, 1/4-inch thick drip line. As you can see here, I have 4 different drip tubes, so I'm going to only plant 4 varieties of onions. I do have 6 total, so I'll have to figure out where to put the rest. But for now, I'm going to put the new ones to me. So I'm going to do Texas Super Sweet, Red Creole, White Bermuda, and the Texas Legend. Now, I'm going to be planting them a little bit closer together. As I said, I'm probably going to be shooting for about 4 inches apart. Now, that is what they recommend, but what they also recommend is that when you have multiple rows of onions, you do give them about 1.5 foot space apart. Here, I'm obviously closer to 6 inches apart, so it's really quite tight, but I feel like with my good climate and my early warmer spring, they should grow just fine, and having all the drip tubing here will give it plenty of irrigation to cover all of its needs. The reason why you need irrigation is that onion roots can be quite shallow. I'm going to use from my pinky to my last finger as a sort of guide to give me 4 inches. And all I'm going to do is come in with 2 fingers, pull the soil back, put your onion in, and then firm the soil around it. That's really all it takes. That's one of the beauties about growing from these sort of starts, is that they're just so simple. You don't want to go any deeper than an inch, because if you do, you'll impede the actual bulbing ability. So you just want to basically make sure these roots get nicely into the soil, and that's really all you have to do. Now, one of the cool things is that you can control what kind of harvest you get. If you wanted to collect some spring onions, then you would want to plant them like this, where they're just maybe 2 inches apart, even tighter. And the beauty of this is that come spring, I'll be able to harvest this one in the middle, grill that up for a quick little lunch, and then leave the other 2 to keep growing to form that final bulb. So I'm going to go ahead, plant this row down, and then we'll move on to the next one. Before we actually get these onions in the ground, there's something really crucial that I forgot to tell you about, and that is when I was talking about the types of varieties that I was growing, I mentioned that what I have are all short day varieties, but I didn't tell you what that means. Short day varieties are onions that require 10 to 12 hours of sunlight before they start bulbing. All onions will be triggered to bulb once they hit a certain amount of sunlight hours, and the short day varieties happen to be around 12. There's also intermediate, which is about 14, and long day, which is about 16. And what that really means is that here in San Diego in summertime, I might max out around 14 hours of daylight. And so if I take a 16-hour onion, those long day varieties, and put it here, it'll never actually bulb. Now, the counterpoint is if I take a short day variety onion and put it somewhere further north, it will actually mature faster, which really means that it's going to be smaller, because the longer it's in the ground before it hits that daylight photo period that triggers it to bulb, the bigger the onion will get. So that's why you want to make sure that depending on where you live in the United States, how far north and south, aka latitude, that's going to really control what kind of onion you are able to grow. So I am limited to growing basically just these, because these are the only short day varieties they have. There are a lot of other interesting varieties, but you just can't grow them in the different photo periods, and you can't really fake it because you can't provide more sunlight than you naturally have. So before you order your onions, make sure you know what kind of variety you need, whether it's short, intermediate, or long. Luckily, most seed companies and onion websites like Dixondale Farm have little maps to show you exactly where you are in terms of what kind of onion you can grow. If you grow the wrong one, you're going to be sorely disappointed because you're just not going to get a proper bulb. So make sure you grow the right variety and you'll be very successful. So the next step here is to just make sure you water all your onions in. We ended up with about 100 to 120 onions in this one patch, which is pretty incredible for such a small little area. It's about maybe 9 feet in length and only not even 3 feet across. So like I said, you could get quite a lot of onions in a small space, and the watering in here is really helping make sure those roots get into the soil, and watering from above is really going to make sure that water percolates down and pulls the roots down with it. Remember, these roots were really dry when we put them in, and while this bed wasn't totally dry, it wasn't totally wet either. So this little bit of watering will really make sure that these onions succeed and anchor themselves in. Now that the onions are watered in, we're going to go ahead and give it a light sort of feeding. So this is a fruit and flower type fertilizer, meaning that that middle number, that P, is a little bit higher, and that's exactly what we want, because we want the P and K to be higher to make sure that it develops proper roots. And that's really all it is with onions. They have such weak, shallow roots that they can use a little bit of assistance to get going. A little bit of nitrogen will also help them in that early stage of growth. But really, you're looking for that middle number, which is P. So again, this is probably about half the strength of what they would recommend. I totally eyeballed it. It's maybe even just a third of the strength. It's really just to give that a little bit of extra perk right at the beginning of their growth cycle and make sure those roots can really get growing. So you can see the water is nice and brown, and it definitely smells like it has organic fertilizer. If you order in bulk like I did, each one of these bunches will only set you back $7. As you order more bundles, particularly from this farm, the price starts dropping. Since I ordered 6 bundles to split between me and a few others, the price ended up being $7 per bundle. And that means that each one of these onions is only going to cost 9 cents each. That is way cheaper than what you could get in the grocery store, and you can't get this variety and just the satisfaction of seeing a giant field of onions growing like this. I'm really excited to see how these grow, and you'll definitely see them in the monthly tour updates as they keep growing, but we probably won't get the first initial harvest until sometime around March, where I might pluck a couple of these as spring onions and do a quick little recipe for you guys. But that's it for planting onions. One of the most delicious, easiest crops that I've added to my repertoire, and I highly recommend you do it too.